Welcome, listeners. I am, as usual, excited to have you here with me today. And today, if you're watching this on YouTube, it looks a little funny because I've got 1, 2, 3 gals, and usually there's just two of us. So I'm excited this week because we're going to talk about Divorce with Respect Week. And I know I have been talking about how, you don't have to have a fist fight through divorce all the time. And I've got two gals. I have Jana Hefty and Michelle Leason, and they are part of collaborative law in Minnesota. And we're going to talk about collaborative law because it is something that I believe in. And it's something that you don't have to fight it out. And we're going to talk more about what that is. But this is just to show you there are other ways, there are better ways to divorce. It doesn't have to be the drag out fight that it used to be. And I know that sometimes it is, but it doesn't have to be. So how I always just let my guests kind of tell a little bit about themselves. And I just have to kick in here about Michelle because she's such a gem. And Michelle really, I mean, I could get kind of teary eyed, really helped me out through a really hard time and scooped in, didn't ask for anything, didn't ask for payment. I was going through a really hard time. And she came in, it was an illness, and she came in and she worked with my clients and she took over. And so I always am so happy if anyone can use Michelle for mediation. And Michelle, you are fantastic at the financial aspects of it too. So I just feel blessed to have you here. And Jana, I don't mean to be like, oh, and then here's Jana in the middle because I don't know you. But I think that anyone who's an attorney who's trying to do this a better way and not fight it out, I'm just happy to have them here. So Jana, welcome to Michelle. Welcome. If you can each, maybe Jana, share a little bit about what led you to be an attorney and to do this kind of work.
That's a interesting question that could take up an entire hour. However, we'll try to cut it down to the very brief cliff notes here. I did actually have a couple prior careers, and I was actually in a bank robbery.
What? I never expected that.
Yep. The whole story is kind of a big one.
Wow.
But ended up in federal court working with a victim's advocate and the state's attorney who encouraged me to go back to law school. So in short, that's how I ended up changing careers, going back to law school and pursuing a better way in a difficult time.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm sorry, but just because I'm so curious and we might go just a little bit longer, you got to tell me a little bit about the bank robbery. Like, what does that feel like?
I was working as a teller. I also was an EMT. And so small town.
I love it.
And had actually just taken some training, EMT training, and that I think really helped me stay calm during the robbery. So I was the teller and he came around, but some of the things in training triggered me to stay calm, be observant, not escalate the situation. And everything turned out as good as it could for the situation. Nobody got hurt. I mean, it was money. Money is money. But they did arrest him and he served his time and we're all on with life. So.
Wow. Okay. So Jana, I think what's really cool, for one, you look way too young to have had a million careers, not a million, but a couple. And for two, I love this, that you were an EMT. Now, my husband jokes about how I immediately get sick to my stomach if a grandchild cuts their finger and but I think that what you're saying is so important when you're working with people through a divorce. That training, I mean, I think it's something that's in us that can help people do that. And that's obviously in you. You were able to remain trained. Can you, if you can, what were some of the tricks to remain calm? Because a lot of people who are going through a really hard divorce, you know how it escalates and then you're not using your brain right. I mean, I always say wiggle your hands. Sometimes you just have to move your body. But how did you stay calm? Like how did you stay calm in that? Because that could help us.
I do think part of it is practice from being an EMT. We're running into the worst time in someone's life,
Mm-hmm.
much like this. We are interacting with people during some of the worst times in their life.
Yeah.
I agree. Sometimes part of it is just how we're built. We have different
Yeah.
abilities in that way. One of the things that I think is part of naturally who I was,
Mm-hmm.
but that did come up in that situation was I see this one. I don't want to make it worse. We don't know if there's more outside. I don't know who else is with them. So relating that to divorce, it's kind of like I know my spouse, right? Or my soon to be ex
Mm-hmm.
spouse, but I don't know the bucket that's coming after because I've never been through a divorce before. I've never gone through this phase. And so
Yeah.
if we can calmly walk you through the next steps for those of us who work in this area,
Yeah.
it's a better way to get through a tough spot.
And no one better than you. So thank you for taking that advice and putting in the hours of going back to school and helping people. I love that. That's so awesome. And then, Michelle, would you mind just sharing with the audience what led you to do this work?
Sure. And Jana, I had no idea that that was your background. So that's amazing. Wow. To follow that, a little bit about myself. I went to law school, actually, not a practicing attorney, became a financial advisor. I have and still am a financial advisor. This was my 28th year. I have a company called Wealth Planning Group that I've started on my own 11 years ago. And after having gone through my own divorce and having it be less than optimal, taking 3 years, 2 failed mediations, ended up going to trial, seeing how the system was broken, in my opinion, and how people needed help to do it better. So I became what's called a CDFA, Certified Divorce Financial Analyst. I then also became a licensed mediator or qualified neutral through the state of Minnesota Supreme Court. And I started my second business, Divorce Smart, and have been helping couples divorce better ever since. And kind of my why, I would say, is twofold. One is I want to help people do it better than I did, right? There's a better way to do it. You don't have to go to trial. You don't have to duke it out in court. And number two is the kiddos. Trying your best to keep the kids out of it and doing it a better way so that you can all move forward on a path to happiness. So those are the two whys of why I do what I do.
I love that. Okay, so let me ask you, in your own situation, looking back on it, do you think you could have gone through the collaborative process because sometimes there are times when you can't, correct? I mean, it's kind of, yeah.
Sure.
Do you think in your situation you could have?
I don't know if we were in the headspace to do that, to be honest. Maybe, but yeah, I think court was probably in our future, and that's just the way it was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
But I like helping people not go that route.
Yeah, amen. Well, so that's what I love about you too, is you went through something hard and you learned from it, and now you want to help people. And Jana, I'm like you. I've been married for 34 years, and so I hate divorce. And it's funny because I kind of stepped away for a little while thinking, and then all of a sudden, like one day I was like, wait a minute, I need to help these women. Like, this is my background. This is why would I stop helping these women? So I know, I came back in and it's fairly new that I've started doing this again. But I mean, these are the people that need our help.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, either one of you who wants to share a little bit about collaborative divorce and the process, because I think a lot of my listeners know about mediation. There's different ways that you can get divorced. You can just fill out the paperwork on your own. I have an online course. Some people do it. You can hire a mediator and come up with agreements together and then take them to attorneys, or you can fight it out, each hire your own attorneys, right? And move forward. So tell us about collaborative law.
You want to go ahead, Jana?
Collaborative divorce is another process. Like you said, there's lots. When someone comes in and speaks with me about a divorce, I like to educate them because the point is to make the choice that's right for you. As you mentioned with Michelle earlier, collaborative might not have been the right choice for her. So I try, and that's what Divorce with Respect Week is doing, is trying to educate people on the options available. So collaborative divorce uses professionals in their correct area. So attorneys aren't necessarily child experts. Attorneys aren't necessarily financial experts. Yes, we deal in both areas. We can help you understand and draft up documents that have the right legal terms for maybe what you're choosing or what the court determines is going to happen in your life. However, collaborative is a process where we use financial neutrals to do financial cash flows for the new situation. We also use mental health professionals to help create parenting plans or ongoing communication systems for the families to continue their relationship in a different way than it's been, right? Hopefully a healthier way than it's been if you're going through the divorce.
Right. Okay. So if somebody's listening and they're thinking about divorce and they're like, oh, I kind of want to try that, it means they both have to be on board, correct? So each person hires a collaborative law attorney, right?
Yep.
And then they agree that is there some kind of an agreement where they're not going to fight it out in court?
It's called a participation agreement, and it's not an agreement that we're not going to fight. We still go through lots of difficult times, especially with the heightened emotions and things that are going on through a divorce. It does say that we agree to communicate openly, to work through our problems together, and that's using the support system that's here, right? Using your attorneys, using the financials, using the child specialist, but we will work through it together and make the choices. The parents will make the choices, not
Right.
the judge. We won't file motions. We won't use the judge as an excuse to not come up with a solution that works for the family. So a lot of times in traditional litigation, family law in Minnesota, minus a few exceptions, you're ordered to go to mediation or an E&E, another alternative dispute resolution system, before you go to a hearing or a trial anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times those can end up with the battles not being focused in the right area. And kind of the cop-out is, we'll just let the judge decide. It's not keeping
Right.
in the right spot.
And I think the great thing about collaborative law and mediation is what you said, is that the parties make the decisions. The parties get to decide how they want to divide things out. And I know, when I help people, I can give them legal information, and I don't act as their attorney ever anymore. I'm just doing the mediations. But that's where someone like Michelle comes in and is so helpful, because so many people, the first thing people are concerned about is kids. If they have their kids, they're worried about them. And the second thing is their finances and how is this going to work? So Jana, does like every person who walks through a collaborative lawyer's door use the financial? Do you automatically have a financial now? So, because sometimes it's probably not that complicated.
No. And like any divorce, right? Any
Right.
couple, any situation, obviously, if we don't have children, we're not probably going to need a family or child specialist to help us figure that out. Likewise, on the financial side, if you're agreeable to everything, both households are set, we don't necessarily need a financial neutral to help us divide it out and create additional agreements or understanding about, retirement accounts or how transferring this money would affect us tax-wise. Those are the things that Michelle is great at. And most times I'm going to say they're needed, because dividing one household into two is a huge financial change.
It's so scary. And I always try to calm people down. And Michelle, I know that you're really good at that, to just like take a look. Why don't you talk through that a little bit? Because I think that is so scary, especially for that person who maybe hasn't been involved in the finances. And I always say there's no shame, because there is usually one person that did that in the marriage and one who didn't. And it can be so scary. But the first step that I find that eases their minds is to just get a picture. So, how do you help people get a picture of their finances in the very early stages?
That's a great question, Lisa. I would say in a collaborative divorce, especially, the efficiency in collecting your financial information is better, because you're not, in a traditional divorce scenario, one attorney is asking for all of your financial documents and all of your other information. The other spouse's attorney is asking for that information. In collaborative, I am the point of contact for collecting all of that information. So what we do is we collect that information, 3 months of bank statements, tax returns, a lot of things that seem scary, and we put it down on a balance sheet. And we say, okay, here's what it looks like. And I help them understand what they have and how it's owned. Because to your point, Lisa, a lot of couples, usually one spouse takes care of the finances and the other takes care of the kids or whatever, however they divide things. So I think it's important for both parties to know where their money is at and how
Right.
and what it looks like. So that's the first part of the financial work that we do in collaborative. The second part of the financial work that we do, I think Jana already alluded to, is around cash flow, budgeting. And okay, if you're going from a household of 1 to a household of 2 with the same level of incomes, what is that going to look like? And I think that is a scary factor for a lot of people as they're going through it too, is how am I going to make it going forward? So I collect things like their payroll or their pay stubs, historical expenses, and we work through them together to come up with a plan. And I think that's a key difference in collaborative is it's the husband and the wife or both spouses working together to get that information.
Yeah.
Once I have that information from them, another part I love about collaborative is the support level, right? So each client has their own attorney to support them in the process. So not only are they working with the financial neutral like myself to help guide them through what it looks like, they have the support of the attorneys to lean on to say, does this make sense? Am I thinking about this right? And I think the thing that sets it apart as well is that it's all 5 of us usually working together.
Mm-hmm.
And we're working together for the common good. And that is how to get everyone in a better place.
Yeah. Amen. Amen. And I think no matter how you do it, you need a team, because I know I had someone who deals with mortgages on, and I'm sure, Michelle, that's kind of part of and that's scary, because some people have a really low interest rate on a home. And now if they're going to be selling it or what have you, they're going to be spending a lot more because the interest rates are higher. And what I've learned, which wouldn't happen in this kind of a situation, is sometimes information can get muddled and the attorney can draft the agreement that, someone's going to assume the mortgage. And guess what? They don't let them assume the mortgage. And so those are things that can get missed if you don't have that team. So yeah, the attorney can write it up and say, yep, you're going to assume. And then sometimes too, they'll tell you that you can assume the mortgage. And then when things change and they see how much you have after the divorce, you're like, oh no, you can't assume it. So it's so, I think, helpful to have that team. So there's the parenting, the finance, and the attorney. Is there anyone else?
So it's a case by case situation, and there are other professionals that we sometimes pull in depending on what's needed. One of those is a mediator. Sometimes we have a mediator help us just navigate a situation. Mortgage experts, we actually have a couple supporting partners.
Yes, you have great ones. You do, yes.
And they stay up on the little caveats, right? If
Mhm.
you're divorced, a lot of times there's things that they can do in that arena to make sure we get the right wording. So their refinancing paperwork is the most beneficial to you as well. Another one, realtors, we are hooked up
Yep.
with some supporting partners in that area, and parenting coaches. So we do have coaches who are either aligned or neutral. So a coach can work with both parents or be aligned to a single parent. A lot of times that has to do with communication, right? And
Yeah.
the forms of what inflames the situation versus how to communicate what's needed to be communicated.
Right. And I mean, I know that there is so much out there that tells us how much better kids do when they have both parents in their lives working together. Not to scare someone who's got a freaky narcissistic, you can do it too. But it does, if you can work together, it is so helpful for your kids. And so that, I mean, I think that was always, I'm a mama, I'm a grandma. That was always one of the things that really drove me. And Michelle, you had kids, right? When you went
Yeah.
through yours, how did they fare?
Yeah, they're doing great now. And what's crazy is while you're married, one of the things that people often think about is let's just stay together till the kids graduate. I remember my ex-husband and I talked about that same thing. Well, that's not always what's in their best interest.
Right.
I remember thinking, oh, I have to keep that family unit together because I didn't believe in divorce either. So you work through it and you stuck it out. But it's ironic to see how much everyone is thriving after divorce. Your kids get to see you in a better place. They get to see your ex-spouse in a better place. They see you happier and more in line with yourself. And I think that alone is something I didn't think about while I was going through it. It
Right.
was everything's changing. What are we going to do now? How is it going to look? And kids are resilient. I mean, my
Yeah.
kids are amazing. They are doing great. And I just couldn't be more proud of how they fared through it.
Well, and Michelle, I think too, I mean, that speaks volumes to you, but I think you bring something up. I think children who go through this, they can be more resilient. They learn how to, the things are changing. I mean, you know what I mean? It builds resiliency and grit. And so there are some good things about it. And then another thing that I like that you said is, and we always talk about how you have to take care of yourself, right? But it's hard to do that. So if you're in this horrible relationship, that's not taking care of yourself. And that's going to speak to your children, you know what I mean, more than if you
Absolutely.
can separate out in a good way. So, okay, I have to ask you a question because this is something that people always kind of bring up with collaborative law. They get concerned because what happens if it doesn't work? So I think we have to talk about it. What happens if it doesn't work?
Yep.
So there are a couple options if it doesn't work. That's part of, I'm going to call it the choice on the front end, and making sure that both individuals, both adults, understand the process before we sign that participation agreement. So it's their choice, right?
Right.
Once that participation agreement is signed, we've all agreed to certain conditions that are in there. And one of those are, if it doesn't work, if one of you decides to step out of the collaborative process, then both attorneys must step off the case as well. And they have to go hire traditional litigative attorneys for the next steps for court. That does not mean all of the progress or anything that has been accomplished is lost. Let's say that they agree to 90% and there's one thing that they just can't figure out. We can still enter that as that agreement, and they can just go litigate that one or two things that they haven't figured out.
Okay, that's so key. And I'm so glad that you said that because I think people miss that. I think because this is what I've heard before. Well, if it doesn't work, you got to start all over again. That's what I've heard. That's not true.
It is not true.
So they get to use the work that's been done. Then they hire separate attorneys if it's not working to deal with the issues that they can't work on collaboratively. So, and I know I don't expect you to have any kind of numbers, but do most of them work that you're?
I'll pipe in on that one. So of all the cases that I've done, I've only had one that didn't work. And the reason why it didn't work is they couldn't come to agreements on spousal maintenance.
Oh,
And so to Jana's point, the case, wasn't successful and collaborated, but we did take all of the information, the balance sheet, the cash flow modeling, everything, the tax planning, everything we've done up until that point. And yes, they have that information. We got 95% of the way there. We just couldn't get to the very end. So I hired new attorneys and took it from there.
that's good to hear. Okay, so then there's another thing that you hear sometimes is the cost. Like, I just think it's better because you're doing it a better way. Like, how you end something is how you begin another. I believe that. And so I would just want to do it even if it costs more. Does it cost more, or is it kind of the same as if you both hired attorneys? In general, what is collaborative law known? Is it more cost effective?
I would say it all depends on the case, right? It always just depends. Yeah. It's typically more expensive than mediation, obviously more expensive than doing it yourself pro se, but it's typically less expensive than litigation. And I would argue that it's more cost efficient, like I mentioned before, because you're not duplicating efforts. You're not paying attorneys to look at multiple statements and things that were provided, and then some things are missing on one end but have on the other, and then trying to coordinate that. You're paying attorney's fees or you're paying paralegal fees in order to have that happen. Versus in collaborative, I'm that point of contact, or the neutral is that point of contact, where we collaboratively work on it, and it saves them time and money in the process. And that's I think a key point too, is I would say collaborative takes probably as long, if not maybe just a little bit longer than mediation, but a lot less time than in litigation, in my opinion. So it saves you time for sure, and it can save you money from litigation. And you have the support that you're not necessarily going to have. But it's also important to be efficient. So in cases that I work on, we schedule all of our meetings out, so they know when they're going to be done. Versus if you litigate or if you have mediation, sometimes it's up in the air on how long it's actually going to take. And I remember that being a fear of mine. How much is it going to cost me, and how long is it going to take? So do I have to keep paying those retainer fees into my attorneys in order to make that happen? Versus I feel like you have more awareness and it's more cost effective in collaborative, in my opinion. Jana,
I always love the idea of people working together and coming up with their agreement together. And that's what's happening with collaborative. That happens in mediation too. And mediation can be part of collaborative. So they're both kind of the same. And now I'm looking at the time and it just sped right by. So I just want to make sure that my listeners know how to find a collaborative law attorney. How can they get information if they're just starting this process?
So as I mentioned, not sure when this is going to go live, but Divorce with Respect Week is March 1st through the 8th. And during that week, if you just Google Divorce with Respect Week, it's a nationwide effort. And California is, I'm going to say, the host site for it. But on their site, you can click the state you're from and see all the collaborative professionals in your state who are participating in this week. What we have committed to is to give free 30-minute consultations during that time with somebody who's connected to us from this effort. Aside from that, we have Collaborative Law Institute of Minnesota, which is where you can find us year-round. And on that, you can find a professional if you're looking, to start the process with a financial neutral like Michelle, or if you want to speak with an attorney or a child specialist first, you can find it on that site.
Wonderful, wonderful.
You can also go to our websites too. So we can, sometimes collaborative cases start with attorneys. Sometimes they start with the family specialist, sometimes they start with someone like myself.
Right.
So yeah, if Divorce with Respect Week, the collaborative site, or reach out to Jana and I.
All right. And I will have that in the show notes. So, Jana and Michelle, thank you so much for taking the time. I know you're busy. I really appreciate it. And I know that this is really helpful information to get out there. So, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Lisa.
Take good care.
You too.